Hello, everybody. Stephen Mead here for Domicile Real Estate for people who love houses. Welcome back to our latest Southern California housing market update. This is for March 16th, day before St. Patrick's Day in 2021. And, our description here is not a teaser. I think sometimes when you're really thirsty, that first sip of an ice cold beverage is one of the best feelings possible. And I think we're on a market that has actually hit a little bit of an inflection point. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a setup with this. One of the things that we've been talking a lot about is that rates have gone up and also prices have gone up. And correspondingly, that has made payments go up. And, I'm of the belief that consumers are primarily driven by housing payments, not housing prices. And I think it's very important to understand that distinction. If you are a buyer in the marketplace, you very much understand that distinction, right? Because you go and you get pre-approved to buy a home, and really, you're looking at that monthly payment. You don't care if that corresponds to a $500,000, $600,000, or $700,000 house. Other than down payment, it really doesn't make that much difference to you. What's really important is, can you afford that monthly payment? And because we've seen these payments kind of take some really big jumps in the last month or two, I think that there's been a lot of speculation about what is that really going to do, and are we going to start to see spring inventory this year like we didn't see last year? And one of the kind of discussions that's been had around here is, why did we not see a lot of inventory last year? Did we not see inventory because people were afraid they weren't going to be able to buy anything? Did we not see a lot of inventory because sellers didn't want people coming to their homes in the middle of a pandemic? Why did we not see a lot of inventory? And it looks like that is fundamentally changing. So while we can argue about the why that's changing, the reality is it is changing a little bit. So let's jump in. Let's go to the numbers and talk about what they mean. So give me a second here. I will bring up the screen share. So the first thing is our total active listings. I think it's important to look here. We're not seeing a huge increase in this. For our under 1 million category, it looks pretty flat. But there's definitely a rise that's noticeable here for our $1 to $2 million listings. Now, part of this is that this graph, between these demarcations is like 2,000 listings, right? So we can see some movement on this front, and it might not look like a very sharp increase in the graph. But I would actually argue that total active listings is a somewhat of a trailing indicator of when our marketing is changing. Our market is changing a little bit. If we take a look at the last 14 days new listings, I think this is really the one where the graph is surprising, right? And if you look back here, if you take a look, new listings totally dropped by New Year's. We got this kind of like beginning of the year bump, and then things really just leveled off with only modest increases. This is, again, for our under $1 million category, LA and Orange counties. But look what has happened the last couple of weeks. This is very strong growth in the number of new homes coming on the market. And if you're a buyer, this is great news for you. If you are a seller, what does this mean? Well, this means that the days of just putting a ridiculous price and doing zero to prep your house and having just the offers pour in, well, those days might be over for you. You might notice that the ill-prepared house gets 0 offers and the well-prepared house gets 10 offers. That might be the direction that our market is going. You can't afford to be sloppy as a seller like you could in the past couple of months. Now, if we look at our new escrows, right, that shows kind of a similar path, but look at how gentle this is, right? Like, these are smaller increases than these new listing increases. I mean, these are big increases. Inventory, there is a lot more inventory coming into the market in the last week. And I think if you're a buyer in the market, this really is great news for you, because this is going to take a lot of pressure off these rapidly rising prices. Now, if we reconcile how all the new listings versus the new escrows that are happening, I think the great news if you're a seller here, though, is that we're not seeing the market tanking, right? We're not seeing these numbers cooling off at all. They're just not rising super fast. They're on more of a slow and steady rise, whereas our inventory is definitely getting this springtime bump. One of the effects that I know we've talked about in the past on here is this idea that buyers move into the market a lot faster than sellers do. So in that beginning of the year, boy, January hits, we get some nice weather and the buyers are out there, whereas the sellers oftentimes will take a bit longer to put their homes on the market. So if we reconcile those two, we get to our absorption rate, right? And this is sort of our quick and dirty measurement of how hot is the market. And you've heard me throw these terms around before, right? 70 to 80% is a seller's market. 80 to 90% is a very strong seller's market. Anything above 90% is a hyper seller's market, hyper competitive. So if we look at this here, look at what's happened is we've seen a little bit of an easing, a little bit more for our 1 to 2 million. We're at right around 80%, and we're around the mid 80s for our under 1 million. So this is still a very competitive market, but it's not that hyper competitive above 90% market that we have seen in the past, right? We've seen this market, and in fact, if you look here, the general trend line is that things are getting a little bit easier for buyers. And if you talk to a lot of agents, I think anecdotally that's working out. Obviously, it depends on the price segment, and every segment and area might be a little bit different. But overall, the market is coming back to more of a normal, just really competitive rather than a crazy competitive level. So if we look at our prices, right, I always find these graphs pretty interesting. The key to look at these is really to think about our trend lines here. If you look at our trend line is of course rising prices, but look what's happened is that this has actually eased off a little bit. And I think it's been probably about 4 weeks since I've said, our market signals are not quite as crazy. And sure enough, that's bearing out in those homes that are now closing. Remember, the escrows from 4 weeks ago, those new escrows are the ones that are closing this week. And so that's why we're finally seeing that reflected in prices. And in fact, at our low end, we're actually seeing a little bit of a decline. But one of the things you'll notice about these graphs here, these are not entirely smooth graphs. You see prices kind of have these crests and little falls. And it's really that trend line that we are looking at. So before you get super excited that you can start writing your offers $10,000 less, no, that may not be true quite yet. But understand that we are entering a period where I think that this rate of price appreciation is going to slow down a little bit. I don't think we're going to see that prices just move 10% in a week, which is what we saw, on those homes in those first couple weeks in January. So this is a statistic that we've started, and it's called our percent still active after 14 days in the market. And one of the things that you notice here is that these numbers have steadily fallen. And that means the way to look at this is as these numbers fall, that means the market's hotter. But what I think is kind of interesting is I think what we're seeing is we are in such an inventory deprived market, right? And that means we're constrained. There's not enough inventory. We still have more home buyers than we do homes available. We're seeing some of those buyers just snapping up this new inventory. And that's why we're not seeing this number start to tick up yet, because there are still plenty of buyers to sort of soak up that inventory, because we've been so inventory deprived for so long. Now, if you look at our close to list ratio, we really need to reset this graph. What you've noticed is that we have shot over 102%. But remember something about these graphs. This is based on transactions that were signed, right, that went into escrow 4 to 6 weeks ago. This is not based on transactions that went into escrow in the last week. And the reason for that is because we don't have that closing data yet. We don't know what those closed prices are yet. Now, our days on market kind of has done something interesting. Again, we've seen this in our under 1 million that continues to march towards 20 days, which is just nuts. And again, what I think we're seeing is as this new inventory comes in the market, we're just so starved for inventory that buyers are just snapping it up quickly. But what this is doing is it means that instead of there being 20 offers on every house, if you're in that entry level price range, maybe now there are only 10 offers on every house, right? Like that, the market is definitely a little bit different as far as sellers go. Now we are see days on market going up a little bit for 1 to 2 million. And again, we've had more inventory in that price range. So you might see this number go back to sort of a more normalish 40 to 50 day period. I mean, look at this graph. Look at this days on market, how that's marched downward. This can go up quite a bit before it's sort of out of the range of what we would consider sort of like a normal market, right? Or even a moderately seller's market. So finally, we're going to talk about affordability, and I want to go into this in a little bit more detail. So I'm gonna give you a little bit of my thoughts. You know, rates have definitely been on the rise, and I think a lot of people are wondering, is this a permanent change, or is this a temporary change in the market? And honestly, I don't know. And I think anyone who tells you they know what interest rates are going to do, if they really knew that, they would be a retired bond trader sitting on a beach somewhere with sipping drinks with little umbrellas in them, because they'd be a billionaire by now. So I think anyone who says they know exactly what interest rates are going to do, I wouldn't bank on that advice, right? You know, we look at upside and downside risk on interest rates. The big question is, number one, are interest rates reflecting inflation going up? And number two, are interest rates reflecting actual economic growth, right? Is our economy actually heating up? And we really need to see a little bit more detail and on those numbers for us to kind of make a determination where that's going. But the end result is that payments are higher. And I think what that's going to do is that is going to have a little bit of a tempering effect on buyers in the marketplace. I just think we're so inventory constrained. That might slow down price growth. I don't think that's going to put the market to a halt in any way. Now, looking at this chart on where are we on payments, if our July of 2018 is our baseline at 100%, where are we today? Well, we are right below 110%, probably maybe 109.5%. I do think this is going to ease off a little bit and it's going to go back to steady, but I do think this is the new normal, that we are above those July 2018 payment levels. Now, is that really all bad? No, I mean, it's been almost 3 years since July 2018. If you're paying within 10% of those payment numbers, that is well within the range of inflation. I don't think those numbers are outlandish at all. Anyhow, I think that's all I have for this week. I do think we're in a changing market, right? This is sort of an inflection point. I think people have been saying, what's going to give, what's going to give? And well, I think what we're seeing is finally these sellers are coming to market with more inventory, and that is going to temper our market a little bit. I do think there's some pressures on buyers too, but if these payments can hold steady, I don't think we're going to see a wholesale reduction or drop in buyer demand. It's just going to level off instead of growing like it has been for the last 12 months. And of course, if you're a buyer, interest rates are still really great, even though they're in the threes. Believe me, that is not the end of the world, I promise. And if you're a seller, yeah, the days of throwing a sign in your yard and getting 40 offers for a home with stained carpets and things put all over the place, I think those days are over for now. However, I do think there's still some great opportunities for sellers. It is still a very good market for you. It is just not as much of a crazy circus, dictate whatever terms you feel like market, like it might have been about a month ago. So anyhow, that is our update for this week. Questions, comments, we love them. Do not forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And obviously, if you would like to work with us, if you have any real estate needs to buy or sell or advice in the Southern California area, especially Los Angeles and Orange counties, we are definitely here for you. Don't hesitate to reach out, and we will see you later on this week for our first time home buyer market update, which will come out on Friday.